What's going on, guys? I'm Ben at FLX, and today we're going over the Bandit assembly. Now, before we begin, I just want to mention that we do recommend professional assembly, taking this to an actual bike shop to get it put together. But if you feel confident and want to follow along, I'm going to go over the instruction procedures to get you up and running. So let's begin. Start off by getting the bike out of the box. Now, as we're doing this, let's keep all of the packing materials and everything to the side. Don't throw anything away until the bike is fully assembled, just to make sure that you don't accidentally toss something that's needed. So let's begin. Before pulling the bike out, you want to remove your accessories box, which contains the charger for the bike, as well as all the tools you'll need for assembly. And then while you're here, you can go ahead and remove some of the packaging as well. Yes, styrofoam and other things are used to keep the bike stable when in transport. So take everything out that you can and put it off to the side before removing the bike itself. Once all the excess packaging has been removed, we can go ahead and take the bike out of the box. Now, there's several ways to do this. The first and easiest is, if you know you're not going to need the box, you can actually go ahead and take a box cutter, razor blade, what have you, and actually cut the corners off so that the box just folds down and you pull your bike out. Another way is to actually put the box on its side and slide the bike out. The third way is what we're gonna do. I have my partner behind the camera right now. He's gonna come around and the two of us are just gonna lift the bike out and start the assembly that way. Now that you've removed the Bandit from the box, you'll see that if you just put the kickstand down, it'll stand on its own, which makes the assembly process really nice and easy, since it'll just sit right here for you. Before we begin putting anything onto the bike though, we need to remove this extra foam packaging. So I have a box cutter or razor blade. You can use scissors, pliers, what have you. We're gonna go ahead and snip these zip ties off to remove the packaging. When we do this though, we wanna be very careful not to clip any of the brake cables or anything that's already on the bike. So just be conscious of the other wires as well as the paint on your bike. We want to keep this thing looking clean. So let's begin. As you guys can see, all the packaging has been removed from the bike. And like I mentioned earlier, we have not thrown any of it out. We've just put it to the side until the bike is fully complete and we can make sure that nothing is in there that we actually need. So with everything out of the way, the first thing I like to do as far as getting this Bandit up and running is actually get the battery charging. That's one of the first things you want to do, is make sure you get it to full before you go on your first ride. So the keys to the battery are located on the handlebar, so I've gone ahead and removed them. One of the cool things about the battery is that this is the charging port up front right here. What's nice about this battery is that you can charge it both on the bike or remove it, take the battery inside or where your charger is located and give it juice that way. So that's actually what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the keys, and on the opposite side, it's a simple locking mechanism. You just turn it, slide the battery forward. It comes right off, just like that. You can see the key right there. There's your USB charging port on the other side of the battery, so if you have a phone or something out riding, you can always use that. Battery removed, you can go ahead and put it on the charger now. A couple quick things to note. One, there is an on-off switch for the battery, so even if it is full charged, if it's in the off position on your bike, it will not turn on, so keep that in mind. Now that our battery is getting all charged up, we're gonna go ahead and install the handlebars. Now, in that accessory box, you'll see a baggie with a bunch of different size Allen keys, as well as an assortment of wrenches and other accessories. We're gonna go ahead and take the Allen key that fits into this base plate right here, and we're gonna go ahead and remove all 4 screws so that we can get the handlebars on. What I like to do is loosen them enough so that they can spin freely. And then what I'll actually do is turn my Allen key to the long side so that I get more efficient turns and these bolts come out a little bit quicker. Now with all of the bolts out, you can see that this little plate comes off. What we're gonna do now is orient the handlebars in the correct position. So there is a front and back to these handlebars. The brakes come already installed, so you wanna make sure they're pointing forward. The throttle will be on the right side. And then before you put it on, even when the bars are facing the right direction, you wanna make sure that there's no twists or kinks in your brake lines and that sort of thing. Since all my stuff is nice and organized, I'll go ahead and put the plate back on the front. And then taking those bolts, we're gonna go ahead and finger tighten just to get all 4 of them in before we torque everything down all the way. With the bolts threaded in properly, we can go ahead and begin torquing this down. One thing to keep in mind is that we want the space or the distance between this plate and the stem to be equal. So we don't want to tighten down just the front bolts and have almost no clearance here, but a lot in the back. We want to do what we can to keep it even, and that means sometimes tightening in a star pattern until we get the bars where we want it. So I'm going to go ahead and begin locking these guys down, doing a few turns on each bolt so that the plate is secured evenly. With everything mostly tightened down, but still enough room that we can adjust these bars, we're gonna set the alignment before we torque it down the final way. So the 2 things you wanna make sure you do when lining your handlebars are, first and most importantly, you have them equidistant from the middle of the bike. You don't want your handlebars shifted too far to the left or the right. What's nice about these handlebars is that there is a grooved edge on them, so you can kind of shift the bar over and line it up so it's perfectly in the center. So once your bars are good on the left and right, it's now time to set the angle of them. And this comes to personal preference. Some people like a very upright ride, so what you can do is actually sit on the bike. Some people want them down and tucked in a little bit more. So figure out where your comfortable ride height is, and once the bars are straight left and right, as well as at the proper angle, now we can go ahead and torque these bolts down the rest of the way. All right guys, we're getting there with this Bandit assembly. Before we get to the display and the electric components, let's go ahead and put on the pedals. Now, they're located in your accessory box. I've already gone ahead and removed them. Installing these is pretty straightforward, but there is one special thing you need to note. Though these pedals look the same, they're actually specific to a side of the bike. There is a left pedal and a right pedal. Now the way to figure out which side it goes on is to actually look on the top side of where these threads are. One will have an R for right, one will have an L for left. So I'm gonna go ahead and locate the left one, and we'll do that one first. Take your 15mm wrench, because that's what you'll need, but let's start this process. The reason we're starting with the left side of the bike first is because it's a little bit unique in the way it actually attaches to the bike. The threads are actually backwards from normal, which means it threads in counterclockwise. So instead of righty-tighty, we're actually gonna do lefty-tighty to get this pedal in. As you can see, as I turn it to the left, it's starting to thread in now. And once we get to the very end of it, what I'll do is then take my 15mm wrench and go ahead and use that to torque it down its last few turns like that until it's stable and not going anywhere. Then what you're gonna go ahead and do is the same thing on the right side of the bike. However, the right pedal will screw in righty-tighty as normal. With the pedals installed, we can now move on to the LCD screen. So go ahead and grab that from your accessories box, along with the smallest Allen key that came with it. What we're gonna do is go ahead and flip the display upside down and remove these two back bolts that are on the handlebar clamp. So let's go ahead and get both those off now. With the bolts removed out of the back, we'll actually be able to bend these plastic clamps a little bit to get them on the bar. While these are pretty solid, you still want to be gentle and not overextend them any more than is needed to get them around the bar. So let's go ahead and put those on now. 1 and 2, right there, just like that. You know the front side of the display because you want the wires to come out the top towards the front of the bike. So before we attach these guys, let's go ahead and grab the 2 bolts we removed. Let's go ahead and torque this down, get the display right, and then we'll move on to the buttons and the connections. One quick thing I want to mention when it comes down to torquing your LCD is that you can actually flip it upside down at first to get easier access to those bolts. Get them mostly screwed in. Then once you only have a few turns left, you can put the LCD screen back into place and then tighten them down the rest of the way. With the LCD secured, let's go ahead and mount the buttons. If you flip it over to the back side, you'll see that there are 2 screws we need to loosen up in order to get these around the handlebars themselves. So I'm gonna go ahead and take those out now. With the clamp removed, we can go ahead and put the buttons on the bar. You want to make sure that the button with the M is actually facing towards the back. That is your power button, so you want to be able to access it with your thumb. So I'm going to go ahead and put it around the bar just like so, and then we're going to go ahead and tighten this back clamp back down. Just like the LCD display, it might be easier to flip it upside down just to get these started, and then once it's in place, you can go ahead and tighten them the rest of the way. Now, just like the installation with the handlebars, before we torque this down all the way, we want to make sure that it's in proper alignment with how we want to ride. So an easy way to do that is to grab onto your handlebars and pretend like you're shifting the pedal assist, turning the bike on and off. So once you get it in about the right angle as well as distance from the grip, go ahead and tighten it down all the way. The last thing we need to do is actually connect the LCD to the rest of the bike. Now you have a green connection piece here. You'll also have one coming from the bike as well. Sometimes what you'll need to do is loosen this little guy, this little cable management helper. And just as you see here, the other green buddy is there waiting for his pal to come along. So what we're gonna do is make sure that these pins on the inside actually line up. And there's actually a little indent or cutout in the side coming from the LCD that'll help you line it up just right. So we're gonna go ahead and find that little indent and then take this guy, make sure it's nice and snug. You don't want to see any green in between this connection. A lot of times what will happen is if you try to power on your bike and it doesn't go on, 9 times out of 10, this connector piece hasn't been installed or seated fully. So go ahead and make sure that's good. And with that done, let's go ahead and put the battery back on it. Once we do that, we'll see if this thing fires up. Now that my battery has been fully charged and reinstalled, I'm gonna go ahead and see if this thing powers up. My screen comes on, the pedal assist buttons function well. So this thing's pretty much good to go. One thing I would encourage you to do before actually taking it out on its first ride is give all the nuts and bolts a once over, make sure everything's tightened down. This is not only a good thing to do for new bikes, but also on old bikes. Once you've been riding them for a month or two, it's good to periodically check and make sure everything's secure. So I want to thank you guys for watching. That concludes our Bandit assembly video. If you have questions or you want to see something else, go ahead and leave a comment, or if you need specific help, please send an email to support@flx.bike and we'd be happy to help you out that way. Thanks guys.